For 11,000 years, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations kept humanity locked away, not to protect us, but to protect themselves. Now the cage is broken, and they're about to learn why their ancestors were terrified. The emergency alarm hadn't sounded in the Galactic Council chambers for 3,000 years. When it did, Council Speaker Vexillor nearly dropped all 4 of his data tablets. The high-pitched wail cut through the usual diplomatic murmur like a knife through synthetic protein paste, and every representative in the Grand Chamber froze. All council members? This is not a drill. The AI's voice echoed through the crystalline walls. Quarantine breach detected. Sector 774 Alpha. Origin point Sol system. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled delegates. The Velkari representatives' scales turned from their usual blue to a sickly white. The Thresson ambassador's 6 eyes widened in what could only be described as primal terror. Even the usually stoic Meridian delegates, beings of pure energy contained in ceremonial vessels, flickered erratically. Vexillor's voice cracked as he spoke. Someone tell me this is a malfunction. Please, by all the old gods and new algorithms, tell me the quarantine field around Sol 3 is still intact. The Council's chief scientist, Dr. Malara Chen, one of the few beings in the galaxy who actually specialized in studying the quarantine zone, rushed to the central display. Her tentacles flew across the holographic interface, pulling up data streams that made the color drain from her translucent face. It's real, she whispered, her voice amplifying through the chamber's acoustics. The barrier, it's not just breached, it's gone. Completely dismantled. And there are, oh no, there are ships, hundreds of ships, all bearing the insignia of she didn't need to finish. The holographic display expanded above them, showing a fleet of vessels unlike anything most species had seen in millennia. Primitive by galactic standards, brutish even, but unmistakably functional, and they were spreading out from Sol 3 like a swarm. The humans, someone breathed. The humans are out. Ambassador Threll of the Corvian Empire stood, his crystalline body refracting the emergency lights into 1,000 red warnings across the chamber walls. Activate Protocol Terminus. We must contain them before what? Interrupted Counselor Yara of the Sisterhood Collective, her voice sharp despite her obvious fear. Before they do what our ancestors feared? It's too late for that. They've already broken containment. If we attack now, we're validating every nightmare scenario in the restricted archives. Vexillor raised one of his primary appendages, calling for order. Everyone, please. We need to think rationally. Dr. Chen briefed the council. Most of us only know fragments of why humanity was quarantined. Give us the full context. Dr. Chen's tentacles trembled as she pulled up ancient files. Documents so old they were still stored in what primitive species called text format. 11,000 years ago, the Precursor Council made the decision to isolate Sol 3. At the time, humans had barely discovered agriculture. They were violent, yes, but that wasn't unusual. The Council had integrated dozens of violent species. She paused, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with anxiety. What made humans different was their adaptability, not just physical adaptation, but conceptual adaptation. Every simulation the Precursors ran showed the same outcome. Given access to galactic technology within 5 generations, humans wouldn't just catch up to established powers. They would exceed them. They would innovate in ways our species couldn't predict, ways that frightened beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel when Earth's sun was still forming. So they sealed them away, finished Ambassador Threll. Like a virus in a containment unit. Not just sealed, Chen corrected. The Precursors didn't just want to keep humans in. They wanted to keep everyone else out. The quarantine field wasn't just a barrier. It was a perception filter. It made anyone who looked at that region of space feel an inexplicable urge to look away, to go around, to forget. For 11,000 years, that field has been one of the galaxy's most closely guarded secrets. Only the highest levels of the Council even knew humans existed. The Velkari representative finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Then how did they get out? Chen pulled up another data stream. They figured it out. Somehow, with their primitive technology, they detected the field, studied it, and didn't just break it. They understood it well enough to dismantle it safely. That level of scientific intuition, that's exactly what the Precursors were afraid of. The debate raged for hours. The military faction, led by the Corvian Empire, demanded immediate military action. The diplomatic corps, led by the Sisterhood Collective, argued for peaceful contact. The isolationists wanted to retreat and fortify their borders, and underneath it all ran a current of pure, undiluted fear. We could glass their worlds, suggested General Krex, his mandibles clicking with aggressive intent. They've barely colonized their local system. Their ships are slow. We could end this in a week. And make martyrs of them? Shot back Ambassador Yara. You read the precursor files. Human history is full of species and nations that tried to exterminate them. It never works. They adapt. They survive. And they remember. If we attack now, we create an enemy that will spend the next 1,000 years plotting revenge, while simultaneously mastering our technology. Vexillor studied the display showing the human fleet's trajectory. They weren't heading toward Council space. They were spreading out, exploring, sending what appeared to be research vessels in multiple directions. They don't even know we exist yet. We have a choice here. We can reveal ourselves as friends or as enemies, but we cannot remain hidden. Not anymore. A new voice entered the debate. Council Elder Murrow, so ancient that most present had never heard him speak, activated his communication relay from his sanctuary world. I remember the debates. His voice crackled through the chamber. I was just an assistant then, but I remember. The precursors didn't fear human violence. Violence can be controlled, channeled, even neutralized. They feared human curiosity. The inability to leave a problem unsolved. The refusal to accept that something cannot be understood or overcome. He paused, and when he continued, there was something almost like admiration in his tone. They were afraid of a species that would stare at the stars and ask, why not us? A species that would look at a barrier specifically designed to keep them contained. A barrier that had stumped our greatest minds for millennia, and treat it as a puzzle to be solved. And now they've solved it. The question is, do we greet them as the fellow travelers they wish to be or as the threat we've always feared? The decision was made to send a diplomatic envoy. Not a military fleet, that would be interpreted as aggression. Not a single ambassador. That would be seen as insulting given the momentousness of first contact. A full diplomatic team, representing the major powers of the Galactic Council. Aboard the flagship Harmonious Dawn, Ambassador Yara was chosen to lead the delegation. She stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the human vessels grow larger on the view screen. They were conducting what appeared to be a survey of a nebula, their ships coordinating with a precision that suggested advanced communications and tactical thinking. Open a channel, Yara commanded. All frequencies. Let's make sure they can hear us. The communication officer's antennae twitched nervously. Channel open, Ambassador. Yara took a deep breath, an affectation she'd picked up from studying one of the few species that also breathed oxygen. This is Ambassador Yara of the Galactic Council, representing 4,000 civilizations across this and neighboring galaxies. We extend greetings to humanity and welcome you to the galactic community. We have much to discuss. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then the human vessels began to change formation, arranging themselves in what was clearly a defensive posture while keeping their weapon systems, crude, plasma arrays and kinetic accelerators, offline, smart. They were being cautious but not hostile. Finally, a response came. The voice was female, steady, and carried an undercurrent of barely contained excitement. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Discovery. On behalf of humanity, we acknowledge your greeting and accept your welcome. We've known for quite some time that we weren't alone. The quarantine field was pretty hard to miss once we started looking. We've been preparing for this moment for 3 generations. Yara felt her biorhythms stutter. You knew? About the quarantine? 73 years ago, one of our physicists detected an anomaly at the edge of our solar system, Captain Chen replied. A field of organized energy that made no sense according to our understanding of physics. At first, we thought it might be a natural phenomenon, but the more we studied it, the more obvious it became that someone built it. Someone was keeping us contained. The captain's voice took on a harder edge. We spent 7 decades studying that field, understanding it, and asking ourselves why someone would cage us like animals. We've developed several theories, Ambassador. We're hoping you can help us determine which one is correct. Were we quarantined because we're dangerous? Because we're valuable? Or because we're something else entirely? The diplomatic meetings took place on a neutral station, hastily constructed in the space between human and council territories. The human delegation arrived in ships that looked like they'd been built in someone's garage, yet moved with the efficiency of vessels centuries more advanced. Their delegates wore simple uniforms, no ceremonial decorations or status symbols. They came armed with nothing but datapads and questions. So many questions. Dr. Malara Chen, whose name coincidentally matched the human captain's, though the species were completely unrelated, presented the historical data. She didn't sugarcoat it. She showed them the precursor simulations, the predictions, the fears. The human delegation listened in silence as she explained how every model predicted humanity would destabilize galactic civilization, how they would innovate faster than regulations could be updated, how they would question traditions that had stood for eons, how they would inspire other species to think differently, potentially causing cultural upheaval across thousands of worlds. When she finished, the lead human delegate, Secretary General James Morrison, leaned back in his chair. He was an older man, gray-haired and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. So you trapped us because you were afraid we'd cause trouble by being what? Creative? By being unpredictable, Vexillor corrected gently. The galactic community has achieved stability through order, through predictability, through species understanding their roles and limitations. Humanity, according to the precursors, would never accept limitations. Morrison laughed, a short, bitter sound. They were right about that, at least. Do you know what we did when we discovered the field? Some people said we should leave it alone. That maybe we were quarantined for a good reason. That maybe we weren't ready for whatever was out there. He stood, walking to the viewport that showed the vast expanse of space. But we couldn't accept that. The idea that someone else got to decide our future, our destiny, our potential, that was intolerable. So we studied, we experimented, we built. We failed repeatedly for 73 years. We lost ships. We lost people, but we never stopped. Because accepting that barrier meant accepting that someone else had the right to cage us. He turned back to the council delegation. You were afraid of what we'd become if we had access to your technology and knowledge. I understand that. But I think you made a critical error in your calculations. And what was that? Asked Ambassador Threll, his crystalline form refracting the station's lights. You assumed we'd need your help to advance, Morrison said simply. 73 years ago, we were just starting to explore our own solar system. Today we have faster-than-light travel, primitive by your standards, I'm sure, but functional. We have energy shields, matter fabrication, artificial gravity. We developed all of this from first principles with nothing but the quarantine field itself as proof that advanced physics was possible. He pulled up a holographic display. Your precursors quarantined us when we discovered agriculture. They feared what we'd do with galactic technology. But by keeping us isolated, they forced us to develop everything ourselves. Every problem we couldn't solve, we had to figure out from scratch. Every breakthrough came from human ingenuity alone. No shortcuts, no asking for help, just us, our curiosity, and the certain knowledge that someone out there had already solved the problems we were working on. The human delegation's chief scientist, Dr. Amara Okafor, added her own display. We reverse-engineered faster-than-light travel from gravitational anomalies we detected in your quarantine field. We developed our own version of energy shields by studying how the field manipulated space-time. Every technological advancement we've made in the last 7 decades came from studying the cage you built for us and asking, how did they do that? And how can we do it better? The silence in the conference room was deafening. The council delegates stared at the human presentations with something approaching horror. These primitive beings trapped in a single star system had achieved in 70 years what took most species centuries with full galactic support. Ambassador Yara finally found her voice. What do you want from us? Morrison's expression softened slightly. The same thing we've always wanted. To explore, to learn, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We don't want war, Ambassador. We've had enough of that in our own history, but we also won't be caged again. We won't be told where we can go or what we can know or what our limits should be. He pulled up another display, showing human colony ships already en route to nearby star systems. We're expanding. We're going to explore. We're going to build. And we're going to ask questions about everything we encounter. You can either work with us, learn from us as we learn from you, or you can try to stop us. But I need to be very clear about something. His eyes hardened. The precursors built a cage that stumped your civilization for 11,000 years. We broke it in 73. If you try to cage us again, we'll break that one too. And we'll do it faster. Every obstacle you put in our path just becomes another puzzle to solve, another boundary to push. It's who we are. Dr. Okafor added, "We've already shared our findings on FTL theory with every human colony and research station. It's in our public databases, our universities, our children's schools. You can't uninvent what we've learned. And every year we're learning more. Faster. We've mapped the technological trajectory. In a century, maybe less, we'll match your capabilities. In 2 centuries, we'll exceed them. Not because we're superior, but because we've been forced to build everything from the ground up. Which means we understand the fundamentals in ways species who inherited their technology never needed to." General Krex's mandibles clicked aggressively. "This sounds like a threat." "It's a fact," Morrison replied calmly. "I'm not threatening you, General. I'm explaining our reality to you. Humanity has spent its entire existence adapting to hostile environments. We evolved on a death world with predators, diseases, and environmental conditions that would kill most species represented in this room. We've survived ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, and our own worst impulses. The quarantine was just one more hostile environment to adapt to." Secretary General Morrison pulled up a final display. "This is what I propose. A partnership. Not integration into your existing power structures. We're not ready for that, and frankly, I don't think you're ready for us. But cooperation. Cultural exchange. Scientific collaboration. Trade. We have unique perspectives on problem solving. You have thousands of years of collected knowledge. Imagine what we could accomplish together." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to vote on the human proposal. The debate was fierce, splitting largely along the lines everyone expected. The military powers wanted containment. The diplomatic corps wanted engagement. The merchant guild saw opportunity. The religious orders saw apocalypse. Elder Murrow spoke again, his ancient voice carrying weight that transcended his physical frailty. "I have lived long enough to see cycles of fear and change repeat across generations. I have seen species join our community peacefully, and others require military integration. I have witnessed the fall of empires and the rise of new orders. And I tell you this, humanity will not be contained. The question before us is not whether they will be part of the galactic community, but whether we will be part of theirs." He paused, letting that sink in. The precursors made their choice out of fear. They were wrong. Not about humanity's potential, but about the proper response to it. They saw chaos where we should see opportunity. They saw danger where we should see possibility. Yes, humans will change things. Yes, they will question our traditions and push our boundaries. But stagnation is its own form of death. Perhaps what our civilization needs is not stability, but disruption. Ambassador Yara spoke next, her voice steady despite her earlier fear. "I've spent the last week studying human history from their own databases, which they freely shared. They are violent, yes. They have warred among themselves for thousands of years. They have committed atrocities that would shock most species in this chamber, but they've also created beauty, art, music, literature, philosophy. They've built civilizations on the principle that every individual has inherent worth. They've developed democratic systems that share power across billions of individuals." She pulled up images of Earth, cities glittering under the sun, forests stretching to horizons, oceans teeming with life. They call their world Terra, Earth, dirt. They named their homeworld after the ground beneath their feet. They're humble about their origins in a way most species are not, but they dream bigger than any species I've encountered. Every human child is taught that they can be anything, achieve anything, go anywhere. Is that not the spirit we claim to embody in our own charter? The vote was called. 1,400 for full diplomatic recognition and partnership, 900 for limited engagement with strict oversight, 700 for renewed quarantine attempts. The humans would be welcomed with reservations and careful monitoring, but they would be welcomed. Vexilor transmitted the results to the human delegation. The Galactic Council accepts your proposal for partnership. We will establish formal diplomatic relations, begin cultural and scientific exchange programs, and develop trade agreements. But I must be honest with you, Secretary General Morrison. Many in the Council still fear what humanity represents. You will face prejudice, suspicion, attempts to limit your expansion or influence. Morrison's response was immediate. Ambassador, we faced prejudice and suspicion from each other for our entire history. Skin color, religion, nationality, gender. We've discriminated based on factors so arbitrary it's embarrassing, but we've also learned to overcome those prejudices. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. We're still learning. If we can handle that within our own species, I think we can handle it from others. 6 months after first contact, the first Joint Human Council research station opened in the Deneb sector. It was a monstrosity of competing architectural styles, the elegant flowing lines of Valkyrie design, the crystalline geometries of Corvian structures, and the brutalist functionality of human engineering. It should have been an aesthetic disaster. Instead, it became a symbol of cooperation. Dr. Malara Chen and Dr. Amara Okafor stood in the station's central laboratory, comparing notes on quantum field theory. The two scientists had formed a fast friendship based on their shared fascination with the fundamental forces of the universe. Your approach to FTL mathematics is fascinating, Malara said, her tentacles dancing across a holographic equation. We've always treated space-time as a fabric to be folded. You treat it as a fluid to be navigated. It's less efficient by some measures, but it opens up possibilities we never considered. Amara grinned. That's because we didn't have 11,000 years of established theory telling us what was impossible. We just asked, what if space works like this? And tested it. Sometimes ignorance is an advantage. You're not bound by what everyone knows can't be done. A young human intern, Marcus, fresh from Earth's Luna University, nervously approached with a data pad. Dr. Okafor, I was running those simulations you asked for, and I think I found something weird. Weird how? Amara asked, taking the pad. Weird like I think I might have accidentally discovered a new form of energy generation? But that seems unlikely, so I probably made a mistake in my calculations, and I was hoping you could. Malara's bioluminescent patterns flashed in surprise as she looked at the data. You didn't make a mistake. How did you? This shouldn't work according to thermodynamic principles, but the math is solid. This could increase power generation efficiency by 40%. Marcus blinked. I just thought, what if we applied fluid dynamics principles to energy fields the way we do with FTL spacetime navigation? Is that not a thing people do? Not until 30 seconds ago, Amara laughed. Marcus, you might have just revolutionized power generation. Write it up. Full paper. We'll submit it to the Galactic Scientific Journal. But I'm just an intern, Marcus protested. And Einstein was just a patent clerk, Amara replied. Welcome to the human tradition of not letting credentials stop you from asking interesting questions. Not everything was smooth. 3 months after the research station opened, a human exploration vessel encountered a Corvian military patrol in disputed space. The Corvians ordered the humans to leave, claiming the sector was off-limits to new species. The humans, seeing no posted warnings or official restrictions, refused. The standoff lasted 6 hours and came within seconds of shots being fired before diplomats on both sides intervened. But the incident highlighted the fundamental clash of cultures. The Council operated on ancient rules and established protocols. Humans operated on the principle that if it wasn't explicitly forbidden and documented, it was fair game. Ambassador Threll confronted Secretary General Morrison in an emergency session. Your people must learn respect for established territories and protocols. You cannot simply go wherever you please without regard for galactic law. Show me the law, Morrison replied calmly. Not tradition, not custom. The actual law. Where is this sector marked as restricted? What treaty defines its boundaries? What documentation exists that we could have referenced before entering? Threll's crystalline form flickered with irritation. These boundaries have been understood for millennia. Every civilized species knows. We've been part of the galactic community for 6 months, Morrison interrupted. How are we supposed to know what everyone knows if it's not written down anywhere? This is exactly what I meant about different approaches. You operate on shared cultural understanding built over thousands of years. We operate on documented rules and regulations. If you want us to respect boundaries, document them, publish them. Make them accessible. We'll happily comply with any law you show us. The exchange led to something unprecedented. The Galactic Council began the massive undertaking of codifying their laws, customs, and territorial boundaries. What had been an oral tradition passed down through diplomatic channels now had to be written, organized, and published. It was a bureaucratic nightmare that employed thousands and took years. But it also made galactic law accessible to new species in a way it had never been before. The humans, meanwhile, started their own project, a comprehensive database of galactic species, their cultures, taboos, and communication styles. They approached it like anthropologists, sending teams to live among various species, learn their ways, and document everything. Some species found this invasive. Others found it refreshing to be studied so thoroughly. 2 years after first contact, humanity had established colonies on 37 worlds and maintained diplomatic relations with 800 species. They'd become a fixture of galactic commerce, their innovative approaches to problem-solving making them valuable consultants and engineers. They'd also become known for their art, their music, and their stories. Human restaurants had become fashionable in major galactic cities. Human films and literature were gaining audiences across thousands of worlds. But the real change came from something unexpected: human questions. Everywhere humans went, they asked why. Why do you build your ships this way? Why is this law structured like this? Why do you use this technology instead of that one? Why do you believe this? Why not try it differently? At first, most species found this annoying, but slowly, gradually, other species started asking the same questions. Young Velkari scientists began challenging old theories. Corvian engineers started experimenting with new designs. Thressan philosophers questioned ancient doctrines. Elder Murrow, now 347 years old and requiring full life support, called it the Great Awakening in his final address to the Council. For 10,000 years, our civilization has been stable, peaceful, orderly, and stagnant. We have not had a major scientific breakthrough in 2 millennia. We have not questioned our fundamental assumptions in longer than that. We have been content with what we know, accepting that we have reached the peak of possible knowledge. He paused. His breathing labored. Humanity has reminded us that there is no peak. There are only plateaus, and we must not stay on them too long. In 2 years, human collaboration has led to more patent applications, more scientific papers, more innovations than the previous century combined. Not because humans are doing it all themselves, but because they're asking questions that make everyone else think differently. He died 3 days later. His funeral was attended by representatives from 4,000 species. The humans sent a simple wreath of flowers from Earth, with a note that read, "Thank you for giving us a chance." 5 years after first contact, the Galactic Council underwent its first major restructuring in 4,000 years. Humanity was granted a permanent seat, along with reforms that made the Council more responsive to emerging species and changing circumstances. The vote was close, but it passed. Ambassador Yara, now serving as the Council's first speaker, stood with Secretary General Morrison at the dedication of the new Council chambers. The building incorporated architectural elements from every member species, including a very human-style garden at its center, open to natural light. "We were terrified of you," Yara admitted. "Some still are. You've changed more in 5 years than we changed in 5 centuries. Morrison smiled. "Change is scary. We know that better than most. We've changed ourselves repeatedly throughout our history. But here's what we've learned. Change is also necessary. Species that don't adapt go extinct. Civilizations that don't evolve collapse. You were stable, but stability without growth is just slow death. And what if we grow in ways we don't like?" Yara asked. "What if humanity's influence leads to conflict or chaos?" "Then we'll adapt to that too," Morrison replied. "Together. That's the thing about partnerships. You don't face challenges alone. We bring our perspective. You bring your experience. Everyone else brings their own unique views. And together we figure it out." He gestured to the garden, where species from across the galaxy mingled, conversing in a dozen languages with the help of translation devices. Look at them. 5 years ago, most of those species had never interacted directly. They communicated through diplomatic channels, following protocols that were centuries old. Now they're talking to each other, collaborating, forming friendships. That's not just human influence. That's what happens when you break down barriers and let people connect. Yara's biorhythms shifted, and what Morrison had learned was her species' equivalent of a laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Morrison agreed. "It's messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating. But it's worth it. Besides, if we wanted simple, we would have stayed behind the quarantine field." 10 years after first contact, Humanity had become an integral part of the galactic community. Human engineers worked alongside Corvian architects to design space stations that were both functional and beautiful. Human artists collaborated with Velkari composers to create music that transcended species barriers. Human teachers helped educate young minds from 1,000 different worlds, bringing their tradition of asking questions to new generations. But perhaps most importantly, humanity had taught the galaxy to dream again. The Titan project exemplified this. A joint effort involving 40 species, led by a human Thressen team, aimed to build a ship capable of reaching the next galaxy. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, and utterly impractical by any reasonable metric. The Council had rejected the proposal twice as too expensive and too risky. The humans built it anyway, with voluntary contributions and crowdfunding from billions of individuals across hundreds of worlds. When it launched, carrying a crew of 200 from 30 different species, it became the most watched event in galactic history. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, commander of humanity's exploration fleet, stood on the bridge of the UES Odyssey, watching the Titan begin its 40-year journey to Andromeda. "You know," she said to her first officer, a Corvian named Threll, son of the ambassador who had once advocated for humanity's containment, "when we broke through the quarantine, I thought the hard part was over. I thought once we got out, once we met other species, everything would be easy." Threll's crystalline form refracted the light from the departing Titan. "And now? Now I know that was just the beginning. The quarantine wasn't keeping us from the galaxy. It was keeping us from ourselves, from knowing what we were capable of when we worked with others instead of just among ourselves." She pulled up a star chart showing human space, now encompassing 42 systems and growing. "My ancestor, Dr. Melara Chen. No relation to me, just a coincidence. She was right to be afraid. We have changed things. We've disrupted 1,000-year-old traditions. We've questioned sacred truths. We've made people uncomfortable. Do you regret it?" Threll asked. Sarah smiled. "Not for a second. The precursors were right about one thing. We are unpredictable. We don't accept limitations. We see a problem and we solve it, a question and we answer it, a wall and we climb it. But they were wrong to fear that. The galaxy didn't need more stability. It needed more life, more energy, more possibility." She turned from the viewport to face her crew. Humans, Velkari, Corvians, Thressen, and half a dozen other species, all working together with practiced efficiency. "The quarantine zone is empty now. But humanity isn't spreading out because we were caged. We're spreading out because that's what we do. We explore. We learn. We grow. And now, thanks to all of you, we're doing it together." On Earth, in the archives of the United Earth government, someone updated the old precursor files. Next to the dire warnings and fearful predictions, a simple note was added. They were right about everything except the ending. Humanity did change the galaxy. It was terrifying, and it was exactly what we needed. The emergency alarm that had sounded in the council chambers 10 years ago had never rung again. Not because there were no more crises, but because the galaxy had learned to handle them differently, together, with innovation and cooperation, and yes, a very human refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The Galactic Council had been terrified when humans emerged from their quarantine zone. Now they couldn't imagine the galaxy without them.